He thought his maid was a thief. For 3 weeks, Andy watched her. Her name was Sarah. She had been with his family since he was 2 years old. When Andy's mother died, Sarah was the one who held him. When his father gave up, Sarah kept the house running. She loved him when no one else would. But Andy never asked about her life. To him, she was just there, quiet, faithful, invisible. Until 3 weeks ago, Andy noticed Sarah leaving his building at night. She was carrying 2 heavy bags. Bags she didn't have when she arrived in the morning. It happened every Tuesday, then Thursday, then Monday. Same bags, same time. Andy's mind went dark. She's taking something, he thought. He checked everything. His office, his pantry, his safe. Nothing was missing, but those bags kept appearing. The question burned in his mind. What is she hiding? On a rainy Thursday night in Atlanta, Andy decided to find out. He left work early. He parked down the block and waited. When Sarah walked out, her coat was pulled tight. The bags looked heavy. They weighed her down. Andy's chest tightened. Tonight, he would know the truth. She took the bus south. She went deep into neighborhoods Andy's company owned. These were blocks he had renovated. These were streets where he had raised the rent and priced families out. She got off the bus at 63rd Street. She turned down a dark alley behind an old church. The paint was peeling. The windows were dark. Sarah knocked. The door opened. Light spilled out. Andy waited. Then he followed her down. The basement was full of people. Homeless men. Tired mothers. Kids in thin coats. They were all eating soup from paper plates. And there was Sarah. Her hair was down. She wore an old sweater. She stood at a stove serving food. She called people by their names. She was smiling. It was a smile Andy had never seen before. A young man stepped up. "Miss Sarah, you got cornbread?" "Made it fresh, Marcus," she said. She handed him 2 pieces wrapped in foil. A little girl tugged her sleeve. "Where does the food come from?" Sarah knelt down. "I make it with love, baby. So you grow strong." Andy couldn't breathe. Those bags weren't stolen. They were gifts. Sarah was using her own money to feed people who had nothing. People Andy's company had pushed out of their homes. She could have asked him for help. But she didn't. After 34 years, she had decided something about him. She didn't trust him to be kind. Andy stumbled back up the stairs. The rain hit his face. He waited 2 hours in his car. When Sarah finally came out, her bags were empty. Her steps were slow. Andy rolled down his window. "Sarah." She turned. She wasn't surprised. She just looked sad. "Get in," he said. They drove in silence. Then Andy's voice cracked. "How long?" Sarah stared out the window. 17 years. Ever since my daughter died." Andy remembered. He had sent flowers to that funeral. But he never asked how she died. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. She looked at him. "What would you have done? Made it about you? I wanted them to stay human. I didn't want them to be your charity case." Something broke inside Andy. He drove her to her small house. He walked her to the door. Inside, he saw a frame on the wall. It was a military medal. The Bronze Star. It was awarded to Sergeant Sarah M. Hart for saving 17 lives in the war. The woman who made his coffee every morning was a war hero. And he never knew. Andy didn't go home that night. He sat in his car outside Sarah's house until the sun came up. The rain had stopped. The city was quiet. All he could see was that medal on her wall. 17 lives. She had saved 17 lives. And he had never asked her a single question about who she was. When he finally drove back to his penthouse, the sun was rising over the Atlanta skyline. The building let him in like a machine. Gates opening. Lights adjusting. The elevator waiting. But this time it felt cold. It felt empty. Felt like a museum, not a home. Andy stood at his window. He looked at the city. His name was on those buildings. He had built an empire. But what had he really built? He thought about Sarah. She had been there his whole life. He remembered being 7 years old at his mother's funeral. His father couldn't even look at him. But Sarah stood beside him. She held his hand. She let him cry into her coat. He remembered being 12, struggling with math. His father was always traveling. The house was too quiet. Sarah sat with him. She didn't understand the math, but she made him hot chocolate. She told him he was smart enough to figure it out. He remembered the night before he left for college. She packed his bags. She ironed his shirts. When he picked up his suitcase, she gave him a real hug. She whispered, "Make me proud." And he had. He made millions. He put the name Terry on half the city. But he never asked if she was proud. He never asked what she needed. The realization sat in his chest like a heavy stone. The front door opened. Soft footsteps moved in the hallway. Sarah was there. Same time as always. Quiet. Faithful. Andy walked into the kitchen. She was setting out his breakfast. Coffee. Toast. Fruit cut into perfect pieces. She had done this for decades. But this morning Andy saw her hands. They were thin. They were worn. These were the hands that served soup to strangers. These were the hands that saved lives in a war. "Good morning, Mr. Andy," she said softly. She didn't look up. "Sarah," he said. Something in his voice made her glance at him. "Are you feeling all right, sir?" Andy wanted to say so many things. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to ask why she never told him. But the words got stuck. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "I just didn't sleep well." Sarah nodded. She poured his coffee. She set the cup down gently. Andy's stomach turned. She was still calling him sir. She was moving carefully around him, like he was someone to serve, not someone to trust. He had built that wall. He had made her feel like a stranger in the house where she raised him. "Thank you," Andy said. His voice broke. "For everything." Sarah's face softened for just a second. Then she nodded. "Of course, sir." She walked out. Andy stood alone in his perfect kitchen. He felt like the poorest man alive. He pulled out his phone. He looked at his calendar. Meetings, calls, investments. None of it mattered. He opened his notes and typed one question. Who is Sarah Hart? It was the first honest question he had asked in 34 years. He went to his office on the 72nd floor. He tried to work on a $40 million contract. But the words blurred. He searched for her name online. Sarah Hart. Desert Storm. Nothing came up. Just a small list of medal winners from 1991. Her name was there, Sergeant Sarah M. Hart. But there was no story, no article. The world had forgotten her, just like he had. Andy grabbed his coat. "It's only 11:30, sir," his assistant said. "I know what time it is," Andy replied. He drove back to 63rd Street. In the daylight, the neighborhood looked different. He saw older women on porches. He saw kids playing in empty lots. These weren't statistics. These were people. He went back to the church basement. It was empty and quiet. Smelled like soup. "Can I help you?" Andy turned. It was the young man from the night before. "Marcus." "I'm looking for Sarah," Andy said. Marcus crossed his arms. "You're the developer, right? The one who owns the buildings." "I am." "So why are you here?" "I'm trying to understand," Andy said. "How long has she been coming here?" "Years," Marcus said. "She found me sleeping in the alley. I was a veteran. I had flashbacks. Nobody wanted to deal with me. Sarah didn't ask questions. She just brought me soup. She sat with me. She saved my life." Andy felt a twist in his chest. "She saved 17 lives in the war," Andy said. Marcus stared. "She never told me that." "She never tells anyone," Andy whispered. "You've known her your whole life," Marcus said. "And you never asked? She gives everything to us. And the people she actually works for, they don't even see her." The words hit Andy like a fist. "I see her now," Andy said. "Do you?" Marcus challenged. "Or do you just feel guilty?" "She comes every Thursday at 7 o'clock. If you want to understand, don't just visit. Show up. Listen." Thursday came. Andy left his office early. He drove south as the sun went down. He parked near the church and watched people arrive. Mothers holding kids' hands. Men in old coats. They all headed for that basement door. It was the only warm place they had left. Andy walked inside. Sarah was already there. She was setting out bowls. She looked up and stopped. "Mr. Andy," she said. Her voice was guarded. "I wanted to help," Andy said. "If that's okay." Sarah searched his face for a long time. Finally, she nodded. "The soup needs stirring. The pot is on the stove." Andy went to the kitchen. He picked up a wooden spoon. He stirred. People started filling the room. Marcus gave him a small nod but didn't speak. Sarah moved through the crowd like she had done it 1,000 times. She knew every name. She asked about their lives. Andy watched her. He realized she wasn't just feeding them. She was making them feel human. "Are you going to just stand there?" Marcus called out. Sarah handed Andy a stack of bowls. "People are waiting." Andy started serving. It was awkward at first. He didn't know how to look people in the eye. He felt the weight of everything he had taken from them to build his towers. But he kept going. An hour later, the room was almost empty. Andy helped clean the tables. He noticed Sarah swaying. She grabbed the counter to stay up. "Sarah." Andy moved toward her. "I'm fine," she said, but her hands were shaking. "When was the last time you ate?" Andy asked. She didn't answer. Andy realized she had cooked all this food and hadn't saved a single bite for herself. He filled a bowl and brought it to her. "Sit down. Eat." Something in his voice made her listen. She sat and ate slowly. When it was time to leave, Andy drove her home. "You should have told me you weren't feeling well," he said. "I'm fine, Mr. Andy." "No, you're not. When was the last time you saw a doctor?" Sarah looked out the window. 3 years. Maybe 4. Andy's heart sank. "Why? I give you insurance." "Your insurance covers almost nothing," Sarah said. Her voice was soft but honest. "It's good for a checkup. But for the tests I need, for the medicine, costs too much. I had to choose. I chose to feed people instead." Andy was speechless. He spent thousands on suits. He spent millions on art. And the woman who raised him couldn't afford her medicine. The next morning, Andy called his office. "Upgrade Sarah Hart's insurance. Full coverage. No limits. Do it now." When Sarah came to the penthouse that afternoon, he told her, "I made you a doctor's appointment for tomorrow. I fixed the insurance." Sarah went still. She didn't look happy. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I didn't know," Andy said. "You didn't ask," Sarah replied. Each word felt like a weight. "I've worked for you for 34 years. I raised you. I held you when you cried. I loved you like my own son. And you never even learned my middle name." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. "I'm trying to make it right," Andy whispered. "You can't undo 34 years with a doctor's appointment, Mr. Andy. You want to help? Stop trying to fix me. Start looking at what you've built. Because I'm not the only one you've been blind to." She walked out. Andy stood alone in his massive, empty home. He went to his office and opened the files for his latest project. It was a big deal that would displace 600 families. He started reading the names. Real names. Real lives. He saw an elderly man named Calvin Wilson. He had lived in his apartment for 40 years. Andy's company was offering him a tiny buyout that wouldn't even cover 6 months of rent in a new place. He saw Maria Santos, a single mother with 3 kids. If she lost her home, she would have to move 2 hours away from her job. Andy put his head in his hands. Sarah was right. He hadn't just ignored her. He had ignored everyone. The next morning, the phone rang. It was the hospital. Sarah had collapsed at her appointment. Andy ran out the door. He found her in a hospital bed with an 4 in her arm. A doctor told him the truth. Sarah had advanced diabetes. Her kidneys were struggling. She had been in pain for years and never said a word. Andy sat by her bed and cried. He cried for the boy she had raised and the man he had failed to become. When Sarah woke up, Andy took her hand. "Your middle name is Marie," he said. "You were born in Birmingham. You joined the army at 19. You had a daughter named Grace who died because she couldn't afford insulin." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've spent 34 years taking your love," Andy said. And I never gave you anything that mattered. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it. Because I need to change. Sarah squeezed his hand. Her grip was weak but firm. I forgave you a long time ago, Andy. But forgiveness doesn't mean things stay the same. It means you have a chance to do better. I will, Andy promised. Then change what you're building, she said. Not just for me, for everyone. Sarah stayed in the hospital for 5 days. Andy visited every morning and every night. He didn't bring work. He brought books. He brought her favorite purple flowers. He learned that she loved old gospel music and always wanted to see the ocean. For the first time, he wasn't her boss. He was her student. On the day she was released, Andy went to his office. The boardroom was full. 8 powerful people sat at a long table. They were waiting for Andy to talk about profits. Instead, Andy stood at the head of the table and said, "We are stopping the Southside project." The room went silent. Then everyone started shouting. "That's a $400 million deal," his partner yelled. "I read the files," Andy said. His voice was calm but strong. "We are pushing out 2,000 people. We are destroying lives to build towers. We call it progress, but it's just greed. From now on, we build with people, not over them. The investors will leave," his CFO warned. "Then let them leave," Andy replied. "I would rather have a smaller company with a soul than $1 billion built on broken homes." Most of the board members walked out, but a few stayed. They saw the look in Andy's eyes. They saw a man who had finally woken up. That Thursday, Andy went back to the church basement. Sarah wasn't there yet. She was still resting. Andy served the soup himself. He saw the man with the cane from the files. Calvin Wilson. Andy walked over and sat down. "Mr. Wilson, I'm Andy Terry. I'm the man who bought your building." Mr. Wilson didn't look up from his soup. "I know who you are. You're the one who raised my rent so high I had to leave. 40 years I lived there. I buried my wife from that apartment. Now, I sleep in a shelter." Andy felt a sharp pain in his chest. "I am sorry. I was blind." "Words are cheap," Mr. Wilson said. "Can you give me my 40 years back? Can you give me the view of the sun rising from my window?" "I can't change the past," Andy said. "But I want you to come work with me. I want you to tell me how to build homes that people can actually keep. I need you to teach me what I've been missing." Mr. Wilson looked at him for a long time. "I'll think about it." Months passed. Andy changed everything. He turned his projects into mixed-income housing. He made sure the people who lived in the neighborhood were the ones getting the jobs to build the new houses. He hired Marcus to help veterans. He hired Maria to help families. And he hired Sarah as his partner. She wasn't his maid anymore. She was the heart of the company. 2 years later, they stood together at a block party. It was the grand opening of a new building. It wasn't a cold glass tower. It had big windows and front porches. Mr. Wilson was there. He was sitting on a bench in front of his new apartment. He had the same view of the sun rising over Atlanta that he had lost years ago. He waved at Andy and smiled. Sarah stood next to Andy. She looked healthy. She looked proud. "I spent my whole life building things I could only see from the 72nd floor," Andy whispered to her. "But you can't see the truth from up there. You have to come down to the street. You have to look people in the eye." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Welcome home, Andy." Andy looked at the kids playing and the neighbors talking. He finally understood. He used to own half the city, but he was alone. Now, he owned much less, but he finally belonged. He wasn't just a developer anymore. He was a neighbor. He was a friend. He was the man Sarah knew he could be. He finally had a home.